What led you to starting this? Because I know, there was a tech startup before this that you were working on, and then a huge pivot to manufacturing.
Back then, you could probably invest a crore, crore and a half and set up a small manufacturing facility. Now that number has gone to about 10 crores.
We've clearly missed the boat in terms of back in the 80s, 90s when China was picking up.
And today, we are at a stage where we are also exporting two-wheelers to Africa. We are exporting two-wheelers to a lot of other countries. And then from we did LED. LED gave us the initial top line of 50, 60 crores as a company. You start a product with imports, it starts selling, you see opportunity, numbers start picking up, then localization sort of starts. Policy making is a big part, yes.
If you get into this with the ambition of making quick money, there is no quick money in manufacturing, right?
I don't have budget for expansion. Uh, where do you want me to get R&D budget from?
Hello and welcome to the Indian Dream podcast. I'm going to start this episode by talking about the revenue numbers of the company that we are speaking about today. 68 crores in 2020, 115 crores in 2021, 200 crores in 2022, 330 crores in 2023. All of this while being profitable. These numbers aren't from a tech company that you keep hearing about in the news. These are numbers of a company called Virtuoso Optoelectronics, which is a manufacturing company and a great success story that came from the Make in India campaign. Before I tell you more about what they do, let me talk about Make in India. Those three words, Make in India, can potentially decide the future of our country. Let me tell you why. We import about $100 billion worth of goods from China. That's 83,000 crores. 10 zeros following 83. That's a lot of money that is leaving the country. And in simple economics, the more money that we keep inside the country, the more we can develop. Most of the $100 billion goes in hardware goods. And with Make in India, the idea is to reduce dependency on countries like China and other countries that we import from. Apart from the economical reasons of why we shouldn't be depending on China, there are also geopolitical reasons why we shouldn't be depending on China. I won't go into more details about that. You probably know about it already. But Make in India is easier said than done. The thing is, China is so far ahead in manufacturing technology and scale that it is very difficult for domestic manufacturers to compete. They can't even compete for domestic demand, forget about competing in export markets. So the question then is, how can Make in India be successful? So there are two ways the government of India has been following and should continue to follow if we want to make this campaign a success. The first is to make imports difficult from other countries. The way to do this is either doing outright bans on certain products or increasing the custom duty so that the products that are being imported are actually more expensive. We've done this with toys, agarbattis, air conditioners, and a recent example is laptops. But this alone doesn't boost domestic manufacturing. In order to boost domestic manufacturing, the government has to incentivize people to invest and build manufacturing capacity. The way the government has been doing this is by something called as production linked incentives or PLIs that you keep hearing about. In short, these are incentives that the government gives to manufacturing companies, specifically in sectors that the government wants to reduce imports in. Now that we understand how Make in India can be successful, let's take a live example of how this has worked in a particular sector. Let's take air conditioners as an example. India sells close to 100 crore units of air conditioners every single year, and this is rising rapidly as the purchasing power in the middle class is increasing. Till 2020, about 30 to 40% of this was directly imported from countries like China, Thailand, Vietnam, and other countries. To reduce the dependency on other countries, the government banned the imports of finished ACs in 2020. What this means is you could import components and build it here, but you cannot import a fully functioning AC from other countries. What that led to is a lot of assembly lines being set up in India to assemble these air conditioners. Subsequently, in 2022, the government launched a PLI scheme targeted to this sector to boost domestic production. And guess what? It's working. In the last 3 years, many domestic companies have been set up to manufacture ACs within India. Today, we're going to be talking about one such company called Virtuoso Optoelectronics. They started out very small back in 2015. They started out very small back in 2015 by manufacturing circuit boards. Then they started manufacturing LED. And come 2019-2020, they started manufacturing air conditioners. In the last 3 years, they've scaled up significantly and profitably while going for an SME IPO. I'm convinced very soon they will go on to Make in India for the world. I talked to the founder Sukrit about what it takes to build a manufacturing business in India, how to think about product development, how to think about financial management, and last but not the least, what do we need to do as a country to capture this manufacturing opportunity that has come knocking on our doors after decades? Before we move on to the episode, I just have one request. Please let me know what kind of industries do you want me to cover on the podcast, and I will do what it takes to actually cover them. Sukrit, so excited to have you on the Indian Dream podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you about the journey that you've had in building a large manufacturing business, and actually businesses, because you now manufacture multiple different things. I'd love to understand what led you to starting this, because I know there was a tech startup before this that you were working on, and then a huge pivot to manufacturing. Generally, it's very rare to see this. So I'm just curious on what led you to start this.
First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure being here. Manufacturing, I think there was a requirement, there's an opening in the space, and plus, I come from a manufacturing family, so manufacturing came more naturally to me. Another aspect was that manufacturing sort of joins you with the society, and I think if you can have a positive impact on society, it was something that I thought would be a good way to go forward.
When you say joins you to the society, tell me a little more about what you mean.
I mean, so the kind of employment that it creates, or the kind of stability it gives to a certain region, I think it's quite significant. I think IT is also done. IT also played a big part in providing employment, but IT employment is restricted to a certain category of people with a basic skill set. Manufacturing, even unskilled people get a lot of opportunities to work in. So you actually pick up people from the grassroots, and they have an opportunity to contribute and build products and get trained. So I think the value addition at grassroots level is very significant from the manufacturing sector, and I think that is the sector which requires probably maximum support as of today, looking at the overall situation of the country.
Interesting. I want to talk about, obviously, the products that you manufacture and how you started with a circuit board and now you're manufacturing air conditioners. So that's a big leap. But before we actually go there, I want to talk about the India manufacturing story, right? We've clearly missed the boat in terms of back in the 80s, 90s, when China was picking up and became the global factory for all practical purposes, right? We missed that boat for sure. But it seems like we have another opportunity, given all the geopolitical things that are happening. I'd love to hear your take on what's happening on the ground when it comes to manufacturing, and specifically electronics manufacturing.
So, in the last 10-15 years that I have been seeing the industry, the change that I see, significant change that I see, is that a lot of things have sort of aligned to put us in a position to scale. I believe we had an opportunity about 10-12 years back also, when people were saying they were looking at other manufacturing options, where India again did not sort of come in the limelight sufficiently, or did not take the opportunity by its horns. Right now, what has happened is, of course, COVID has had an impact. China is becoming stronger, and being a political tussle with a lot of countries is becoming a reason. Indian government has been stable for the last 8-9 years, which has been a good reason. So a lot of reasons are sort of combining. Even the investor community now is more open towards investing in manufacturing, which was not the case 10-15 years ago. So a lot of factors have sort of combined, uh, and pushing and giving us the opportunity to sort of really make India a manufacturing hub. There are problems that probably China is facing internally as well. Their labor costs are increasing. They are running out of probably certain resources, or they have overcapacities in their country. I mean, I think that it is always a cycle, but I think the opportunity for India is here. If not just in electronics, but I think in a lot of other products as well. So if you look at the automobile cycle, how I see the automobile cycle, automobile localization in India started about 20 years ago, and today we are at a stage where we are also exporting two wheelers to Africa. We are exporting two wheelers to a lot of other countries. Cars also we have started. We are exporting parts now, or components of cars. So all this has happened over the last 20 years in automobiles. I think in electronics we can probably do it in 10, and certain segments we can do it in 5. So the to build that ecosystem, I think it takes time, but a manufacturing ecosystem once built can take you a long way, and you have to first create a basic size and scale to be able to go international, because you can't do business with somebody who's sitting thousands of miles from you and expect that everything will go smoothly on day one, and you need certain bandwidths to be able to sort of cater to their requirement. because the investment that it takes, let's say you're making, a lighting product, let's say you're making an LED lamp, and you have to sell it in Middle East or Africa, and you send it there, the electrical conditions are different, the behavior pattern is different, the local norms are different. So until and unless you are sort of comfortable with all of this, it becomes very difficult for them to, for you to penetrate that market. Their expectations of the product, their design sense, everything varies. And unless you have the capability of sort of adapting to their requirement, you won't be successful, which is not the
Interesting.
case in maybe IT. IT also has its own set of adaptabilities, but the change there is faster, or you can adapt faster. In manufacturing, adaptation is more difficult, I would say.
Yeah. So in that sense, we actually have a benefit that we have a large domestic market that you can start catering to. There are a lot of countries that don't really have that market, so they have to start with exports and then the challenge of size and scale on day one. Versus we can iterate our way to that, right?
Absolutely, and our growing, growing income in general is also creating a large consumer base, which was also probably missing 10, 15, 20 years back. So I think that also gives a huge impetus.
Interesting. So let's say we fast forward 12 years, right? If India has to get the manufacturing story right, which is be a globally relevant player across different sectors, what do you think we need to get right in order to make that happen? And why did like and sort of an automatic comparison is why did we miss the boat 10, 12 years ago and then a few years before that as well?
So one important change that's happening, and we need to continue doing that, is reinforcing the fact that Indian products are not bad. So
Hmm.
we were very, so there was earlier a mindset that Indian products are not great, but now that mindset is beginning to change. So I think that mindset is important, and being a little loyal towards locally manufactured products, whether it is government enforcing it via regulations or people incorporating it by choice in their lifestyle, I think is important. If you are able to do that, then you protect this local manufacturing economy as such. So I think that is one important aspect. The second is we have abundantly available human resource as of now, and I don't think that will become a constraint for the next 10, 15 years. But the only aspect there is training and upskilling and getting people to be focused and motivated. I think that is where there are challenges, and we need to find ways to do that better.
Yeah.
So, and third is, of course, we need to continuously invest in core technologies, which will happen by default as business grows. Because let's say you want to invest, there's a lot of talk about semiconductor investment now and everything. So, say talking about investing in semiconductor is one thing, but actually investing, developing products, getting it validated, going to the market, it might be a long gestation cycle. It can be 3 to 5 years for by the time you start seeing revenues out of your investment. So having that patience is also very important, and that is where probably investors or large business houses or government comes into picture, where they say that okay, we are behind you, you invest, and let the investment comes in. We start seeing return in 3 to 5 years. So that patience is also very important. So we have to play a long-term patient game. We need to have certain protections and loyalty towards Indian manufacturing, and the third aspect is we need to get our workforce channeled in such a way that we are able to derive maximum results. Engaging female workforce also, I think, is an important part of that, because still I think most of the female workforce in India does not work, which is a huge chunk of the population. So I think these three are the core drivers which will help us get there. Of course, apart from this, there are macro situations like the world scenario, how the political situation is, and all the other aspects, which I think will keep changing a little bit here and there. But I don't think they can strongly, until unless there's a major world event, it will put us off track. But how fast we go depends on probably these three factors, according to me.
And policy making is a big part of that as well, right?
Policy making is a big part, yes. So we need consistency in policy, at least, if nothing else. And second is if you can insulate and promote local manufacturing, that is also a plus. But you can only do that to a certain extent till you don't render the, you don't make the entire situation uncompetitive. You don't want to get in, too much of policy-based restrictions, I don't think that is a healthy too. So, I mean, so limited restrictions to sort of give local manufacturing an edge is probably the way to go.
Yeah. I mean, and if you look at the China story, right, the government played a huge role in right from the common knowledge of keeping the currency low so that you could actually get in a lot more capital, versus skilling talent and patiently backing a lot of these large industries in China. That none of that would have happened if there was no patient capital. And that brings me to my question on, when you say patient capital, what are the sources of patient capital today, right? And this sort of leads to the fact that you did an SME IPO as well. What are, as a manufacturing business, what are the sources of capital, and can is there enough of it available for hundreds and thousands of manufacturing businesses to come up and flourish?
So I think the challenges a manufacturing business faces is that if you are in a high growth, high volume product, the margins are typically lower because then the market is bigger, everybody wants to be a part of that market. The second part is manufacturing entails a lot of investment initially and then results sort of follow. So the sources of capital available today to a small and medium manufacturer is probably only their own resources, which are of course limited, followed by bank debt, which is also limited to a certain extent because banks also have a strong scrutiny process in India, and the collateral requirements and everything are there. So third is of course private equity. But private equity, the challenge that we faced is private equity coming into manufacturing. They don't really come into manufacturing before you are a minimum certain size, maybe 500,000 crore top line is what they require for you to be viable for them to invest because then normally their pocket sizes are bigger. Angel investments in manufacturing are still not as prominent because people don't, I mean, investing in assets is not something that people still believe it can give them a 5x, 10x, 20x return over a short period of time. The fifth, of course, is what we did is going for an IPO and going to the public for money, which is one option. I think SME IPOs is a very good option that was earlier we did not have that option, but now we did. So in our case, also we were at a stage where we required funds to grow, and there we were too small for private equity, and bank debt, we were already sort of maximizing the bank debt that we could take. So there was no other way to raise funds, and we saw SME IPO as a good opportunity, and that is why we went for it. So I think these are the five avenues open today for MSMEs. But I think probably making it easier or making funds available more easily is important, but the only challenge there is the return to reward ratio in a manufacturing business does not is not as lucrative as it is for probably another startup in the tech space. So I think
But the flip
that
side of that is the risk, if done right, the risk of actually this working out is lesser, right? Like these are supposed to be higher expected value of return, if nothing else.
correct. So, I mean, the probability, I mean, you're not sinking money in intangible assets. So, the advantage is that you're buying tangible things that you can monetize, and the risk of losing the money is not maybe from 100 to 0. Maybe you
Right.
go from 100 to 80 or 70. So, the upside is maybe 150, the downside is 50.
Hmm.
In case of a startup, the downside is 0, but the upside can be 1,000. So,
Right.
that is the differentiation as far as the sector is concerned, probably.
Interesting. Tell me a little more about the decision to go SME IPO and the process that you had to follow, and like what kind of companies are suited for the SME IPO market.
So personally, if you ask me, in our case, like I was saying, that we wanted the equity because we already had explored debt, and we were seeing business opportunity. So when I am sitting on business opportunity and I'm not able to cater to that business opportunity, I think I'm losing out. So whether you'll get the best valuation for your company on SME IPOs, maybe not, because you always probably value your company higher than what everybody else is valuing it because it's your own. So I mean, you may feel that you're not getting the best valuations, but if you want to forgive, I mean, I believe we should prioritize the company more than what we are thinking as individuals. So if the company needs funds and the company has an opportunity to grow, and at that time, if you're not giving it the required resources, it will not grow. So that is why we decided to go for a SME IPO. The SME IPO itself was a small IPO. The IPO size was only about 30.24 crores. So we were valued at about 120 crores when we got listed. But subsequent to listing, we listed almost at double the price on the day of opening. And over the last 1 year, we have grown from 120 to now about 500, 550 crore market cap. Because the results, because people have started interacting, seeing how the company is doing, they're monitoring our performances quarter on quarter. We were also able to raise a preferential round of about 35 crores 6 months into the IPO. So, I mean, now that avenue was earlier that avenue never existed for us. But post listing, the avenue did become available. One important thing there is, I think SME IPO is an amazing platform that the government and stock exchanges have created. But I think the companies that are looking at growing at a rapid rate, I think for them it's a very good opportunity and a good avenue to go for an SME IPO. Companies that are stable or can fund their growth through internal accruals should probably wait it out till they're a certain size and then go for the main board IPO directly. So I believe if capital is restricting you and you think capital is what you need to sort of scale, then I think you should get capital from SME IPO or any other better avenue if you can find. But I think starving business for capital is not probably the best way to sustain the business.
Yeah. And when it comes to SME IPO, is it the similar process of, the institutional investors? Are they the same kind of institutional investors that underwrite an IPO, or are there specific institutions that are looking at SME IPOs as a category?
So, of course, my knowledge there is limited, but what I have experienced is, of course, there are certain categories of investors who are open to investing in MSMEs or SMEs. Not every investor would invest. Let's say large mutual funds don't come into SME investments because they feel that the market share or market size is too small, or the ticket size is not correct for them. So, different funds have different ticket sizes, but there are now quite a lot of funds who are looking at SME as a viable investment option. So that has also improved significantly over the last few years.
Got it. Okay, I'm gonna sort of take a bit of a U-turn in terms of going back to where it started, because all of this is talking about once you achieved a certain level of scale and therefore you were able to go IPO. But what's interesting to me is you started out manufacturing circuit boards, which wouldn't have resulted in building this larger company, right? So you had to. What was the vision back then? What was the thought process of getting into circuit boards? Because clearly the ambition was there कि कुछ बड़ा बनाना है, right? Uh,
So the only thing, I mean, we're still very small, but the only thing that was common is that thing common in my head was to create something sustainable which will survive and thrive. Was the only objective and the only thing that has stayed sort of true from the day one to now.
how much
Circuit
of that
board.
was because of actually starting a tech startup and realizing कि वहां पर profit बनाना impossible जैसा है?
No, so tech startup. When I was trying to get into e-commerce for the 2 3 years that I was doing that, what I realized was, I think that time one e-commerce was also sort of picking up. I mean, it was in the initial stages of growth.
I mean, it was before Geo, right? Like it's before
It was
Geo, after
before
Geo.
zero, correct? So it
Yeah.
was before zero. So that time the penetration was not as high, and consumer confidence in an online shop was low. The second thing was I sort of it was a cultural shock for me when I realized that people are expecting you to sort of commit undoable figures. I was not able to do that. I mean, when you went to an investor, they expected you to say 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. I said 10, 20, 50. 80, and I thought I was touching it. So when they said 1000, 10,000, where is 1000, 10,000? I said it will come probably, but it'll take time. So, I mean, I was sort of not there, and I was unable to get funded that time. So I think that was one of the reasons why it was not sustainable. So what I was doing was we were doing e-commerce and we were also doing projects offline to sort of sustain the e-commerce business. So what we were earning in projects that we were doing offhand, we were spending on e-commerce ads and everything and keeping the website running and delivering, because delivery costs also were way too high that time. So because that ecosystem was also evolving, and consumer spending was also low. So as a entire thing, it was not sort of settling in. Today also, if I look back on the entire concept, I think the concept still holds good. But of course, probably I was not the right person to be doing it. Coming to manufacturing, there was opportunity to get into electronics here. So electronics in Nasik, which is my hometown, was limited. So there was not too many people in electronics and circuit board manufacturing. The investment also initially was not too high. I mean, you could get into manufacturing low-end circuit boards with a minimal amount of investment. I mean, that being said, now if you want to get into electronics, I think the investment ticket has gone much higher because everybody's expectation is much higher in electronics, and the complexity.
Tell me what that number could be back then and versus what it is now, if you want to get into it now.
So back then, you could probably invest a crore, crore and a half, and set up a small manufacturing facility. Now that number has gone to about 10 crores.
Because
So
there's nothing small that you can do anymore. You have to do it at a certain scale now, right?
certain scale also, and the complexity of electronics has also changed. So earlier, most of the components were discrete. You could put them by hand. Now
Mm.
everything is gone towards a machine-based placement. The size of the packages of components was bigger. Now they've become smaller, so the accuracy levels are higher. Skill set availability requirement then and skill set requirement now has also taken a change, and this is changing rapidly. So, I mean, even if you see, like, let's say, our mobile chargers, earlier a charger was probably 300 rupees at that time, and now a charger is only 30 rupees or 50 rupees if you want to buy it in an unorganized market. So, I mean, the cost of tech has come down, and to sort of match that tech, you need to be as efficient as automated to be able to do that. Otherwise, you're not competitive. So that change has happened over time. So got into electronics. Electronics, then getting into lighting was easier because LED lighting was an extension of electronics. So we started making a lot of LED based products. And then from we did LED, LED gave us the initial top line of 50, 60 crores as a company. And from there, we were very fortunate to get an opportunity to get into AC manufacturing. At that time, AC manufacturing also in India, earlier, till about 10 years back, a lot of ACs were being imported. Then the outdoor unit of the AC, there are two parts of a split air conditioner. One goes outside and one is inside the room. So the outdoor part localization started about 10, 12 years back in India. And there are some large players today who are doing it and who started that time and have scaled significantly. Indoor unit localization sort of started 5 years back or 6 years back, which picked up pace during that time. And we were able to, we also fell into that path. And we started with manufacturing indoor units for air conditioners. And of course, from there, the scale happened because the scaling was there, the requirement was there, and we also got the opportunity to scale. We were fortunate enough to get one or two very good customers both in lighting and air conditioners. And with their help support, we were able to understand the technology, product, learn how it's done, and we were able to grow the business to what it is today.
So much to uncover there. One, when you say localization was happening, what drives localization for certain product categories? Because I'm assuming that's a good way to figure out where the opportunity is, right?
Correct. So if you see if you're an early mover, it gives you a lot of advantage. But an early mover, you can only be an. I mean, if you ask me today, let's say we'll talk about the AC industry. So the AC industry 10 years ago was probably we were selling about let's say 2 million, 3 million split air conditioners across the country. And at that time, the market, or maybe even less, I'm not sure. But the market was not lucrative for enough number of players to come in. Plus, if you want to set up manufacturing, you need a minimum viable scale for you to start manufacturing. Because manufacturing is not just about making up. I mean, so let's say you want to make an AC, you need small things like, I mean, there are large parts like plastics, electronics, motors, uh, which some you're importing, some you're doing locally. But there are also smaller parts like nuts and bolts, like packaging, like I mean, wire harnesses, cables. Now, I mean, such small things also, if you don't have the ecosystem available locally, you will never be able to make this product at a competitive rate. So, till you don't have a sufficient scale for the market, it's very difficult to develop this entire ecosystem.
Hmm.
So you start a product with imports, it starts selling, you see opportunity, numbers start picking up, then localization starts. This is one way of developing a product cycle. The other way is you build a product, you start promoting it, and then you grow with the product.
Hmm.
So that's the other way. But the other way takes a lot of investment upfront with uncertainty of whether you will be able to reap revenues out of it. So I think a country like US was very good at that. I mean, they created a lot of products, a lot of them failed, but they got funding for hardware-based products also. I mean, not from today, but maybe 30, 40 years, 50 years. Since 50 years, they've been getting funding to do that. India is not, we are not still very, I mean, we are not still so strong in developing our own products. But we are going the other way. We are sort of adopting the product, backward integrating it, and then innovating it. So we are following a different path, which is more probably suited to our ecosystem. So that is how it's scaling. So now, when there was minimum mass or minimum volume available, so then a lot of people said, let's make it locally. Let's importing is too expensive. Logistic costs started increasing. You could not probably have the flexibility of changing your design very quickly, or orders would take 4 months, 5 months to come. So all those things start becoming a hurdle when the number starts increasing, and then you say let's do it locally, and there also you say let's assemble locally, and then once you start assembling locally, then you say let's make the components locally, and then you start making components locally, and then you say we'll make the, I mean, sub components also locally, and then the entire ecosystem sort of starts growing. That's what happened in automobiles as well. And this is, I mean, so if you look at, I mean, from whatever I know, India is not exporting a lot of products. We are exporting components. We are exporting food processing because agricultural was typically strong. And then you just forward integrate it to food processing and you could export it. But electronic products, I don't think there are too many electronic products that we are developing, manufacturing here, and then exporting. Only in the last few years we've seen that change happen, and I think the more that happens, the better it is going to be for the country going forward.
Interesting. So, two things that I'm going to connect back. One is all of this localization requirements with the demand increasing. If that can be clubbed with good and minimal policy, that can put fuel to the fire, right? Which is saying that, hey, imports are going to be slightly more expensive, or it needs certain kind of quality controls if you're importing it. Because that story played out in toys. I've been following that sector where we put some quality control order back in 2020, and that industry has skyrocketed on manufacturing toys in India, right? So it's
Yeah.
that kind of policy making clubbed with the local demand that's being generated, starts there, and then connect back to your earlier point of once you do this for a few years and develop economies of scale and develop a product quality, then the export market suddenly opens up.
Yes, correct. And export market, see, if you want to export something, you are a customer sitting out of, let's say, Africa, any country in Africa, and you say, I want a product, and I send you a sample, and you say, this product is not perfect for me. Can you please tweak, I mean, the performance a little bit and the aesthetics a little bit. Now, if I'm not manufacturing the product and components, and some components are coming from China or Vietnam or Malaysia, then what I have to do is I have to first send that requirement to another vendor of mine. That vendor sitting somewhere in the world will change that part and send it to me. I will make a part and send it to you as a customer in Africa. And this may take 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. First of all, nobody has the patience of 4 months anymore. And the second is, uh, in this much time, he'll probably go to China and say, okay, you might as well
Definitely.
buy it from there. The
Yeah.
second is, if I am buying a lot of components from China, I am paying freight on that. I am probably paying margins to companies in China. They are selling it to me. I'm adding my own margin and selling it to another country. That also makes it unviable because I will not be viable on cost. So until unless both fall in place, a customer will not buy, even if he wants to buy. Let's say a European customer wants to buy from India, saying that they want a China plus one strategy. We may be 2-3% more expensive in price, which he may absorb. But if our turnaround time is 4 months or 6 months,
Right.
it makes it unviable for him to do business with us.
Yeah, and if they're going China plus one, it's also, some sort of decision that said I want to reduce dependency on China. And if you're going to be importing from China, that basically cancels the whole proposition, right?
Correct.
Uh, yeah.
Correct.
Um, so what we've sort of established so far is how to identify that opportunity, which is look at sectors that are growing domestically, and we are still importing a lot of those products or components, and start figuring out if you can build some of those in house. Now, the next step of this, which I think I have personally seen people struggle a lot, unless you come from a manufacturing background, is the mindset required to actually run a manufacturing business. It's very different from running a service business, or maybe even a software as a service or IT business, right? Because at the end of the day, these are businesses where you can iterate very quickly, go to market very quickly, start seeing response from the customers, and pivot if need be. But manufacturing is a completely different ballgame when it comes to the mindset. Tell me a little bit about what is that mindset, because you've seen both sides of the world now.
So, software is more people driven sort of work where you need your team to be very cohesive, you need the team to be very responsive and to build and creative in a manner of speaking to build a product. Manufacturing is more system based, it is more process based, it is discipline. You cannot run a plant by saying that okay, we'll have a party all the time. I mean, the idea is not. I mean, you have to come on time. You have to go on time. You can't have, let's say, flexible timings for the team because the assembly line cannot run by 3 people when you need 10 people. So there's a lot. I mean, there's a shift in the way you look at things in manufacturing. The problems that you face in manufacturing, I mean, you face problems in both, probably the service sector and manufacturing sector. I'm not saying one is more easier than the other, but manufacturing, the problems are different. They're more mechanical. You have to sort of get your hands dirty in terms of understanding what is the problem and how you go about solving it. You need people who are technically sound as far as understanding machinery is concerned. The health hazards or the risks involved are higher as far as accidents are concerned. So such things a lot of people don't want to get into because doing the same thing day in and day out may not be very interesting to them. And developing systems and placing systems becomes very crucial if you want to sort of scale manufacturing. If you're unable to do that, then I think scaling becomes difficult, which I believe is true for software also, but probably a slightly different way of doing it in both sectors. Manufacturing, I will not say is easy or difficult. I will just say that you need to have, or you need to be ready to have that mindset, put in your time, and the required number of years to sort of get it off, and then you can build on it. And developing your team and having a team which understands the systems and the machinery and equipment and processes is very important because you cannot know everything in manufacturing.
Yeah.
So I think that plays a crucial role. I still feel a lot of manufacturing in India. I mean, it has a lot more potential, and we are still probably scratching the surface. And we have a long way to go. So let's hope we can all come together and do that.
Yeah. And I think it's just from a national security perspective, given what we've seen over the last 3 5 years in terms of geopolitical issues and COVID and whatnot. It for a country of our size, we have to have a very robust domestic manufacturing ecosystem. Otherwise, we are always dependent on other countries. Even today, right? Even after so many years of Make in India and pushing for it, if you still look at the China import numbers, they still keep growing, right? Because just the sheer demand that our country has versus the supply gap is so huge that that number is going to keep going up before we can actually bring it down. And for us to bring it down, we need a lot more of these manufacturing ecosystems built in India.
Absolutely. I mean, the scale what China has achieved now is almost in every industry is probably 10 to 100 times of where we are. And that is only in terms of the large numbers. I mean, the backward integration or the component, subcomponent, basic core raw material ecosystem, it's probably an even bigger number.
Yeah,
So, like you're saying, it'll take time. And I think without doing that, we can never truly say as a country we are independent. And if we have
absolutely.
fourth, one fifth the population, then I think are depending on somebody else for small things is probably not the best way to go
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah, I read this about a quote from Tim Cook where he said a lot of people still believe that we manufacture in China because it's cheaper, but that might have been true back in early 2000s. But now, when it comes to the ecosystem, and he gave an example of a tooling engineer, right? He said if I collect all the tooling engineers that are required to manufacture an iPhone, a specific kind of tooling engineer, there are maybe a few hundred, if at best, in the US, across the US, right? Versus if I go to China and land in that one particular city, there are 10,000 of those people available, right? Just from a skill perspective, just from a scale perspective, they've just taken it to the next level.
And this all comes when you're actually doing it.
Yeah,
So, I mean, you can learn about running a machine on the computer and on the books as much as you like. But unless you have people running the machine day in and day out,
yeah,
you will not really be an operator. I mean, I might talk about knowing how to run a machine, but if I actually go stand on the machine, I might not know what to do with the machine, or I
yeah,
might not be able to read the machine until unless I'm standing with it 24 by 7 or whatever, 5, 6 hours a day, 8 hours a day with that machine. I don't really get a feel of it. So, till
yeah,
you don't create batches and batches and batches of these people, who out of whom some will then upskill to understanding how the tool works, and then
yeah,
some will upskill to probably designing a tool. So that ecosystem evolves, and
yeah,
China had a head start. Companies like Apple came in, they grew their manufacturing, they scaled, they improved, they pumped in a lot of money, and today that ecosystem got created. So now we have a bigger challenge to break that ecosystem or probably create a similar ecosystem in India. So, I mean, opportunity and challenge probably go hand in hand. So, I think both are standing strong in front of us.
absolutely. And as you said, I think it's just that patient capital and the patience of the younger generation. Because if you get into this with the ambition of making quick money, there is no quick money in manufacturing, right? There are a lot of sleepless nights in the beginning, if anything else. And then eventually, once you hit certain scale, is when the money starts coming in.
That is true. And also, I mean, the amount of risk that probably you carry on your head because of all the debt, because of, I mean, the accidental risk, the pollution and other government compliances risk that is sitting on your head is significantly, I feel, heavier. So, I mean, you're sitting on all that and you need to patiently sit and wait and hope everything falls into place.
Yeah, that's a good segue to one of the conversations that I want to have is when it comes to financial management, right? It's extremely important in manufacturing because it's not just about profitability, it's not just about securing the initial investment, it's not just about, getting the right kind of debt, but it's also that working capital management because you have to give credit, that understanding of how do you really manage your capital. If you can shed some light on that, on some of the operating principles that have helped you scale sustainably.
So, fortunately, because of our customers and our team, we've been able to scale from a level of 50, 60 crores in 2018 and 19 to last year we did almost 330 in 338 as our top line. Uh, Cash flow management, of course, is a major challenge. And if you don't keep an eye on your cash flow, I think things can crumble very quickly because you are not sitting on a pile of cash and you're saying that I have a runway to burn for 12 months. You are sitting on, you have to sort of cycle your cash every month, every 2 months. And if you miss that cycle, then suddenly you find yourself in a position where you're unable to probably pay, or you're unable to buy raw material, or you're unable to pay statutory dues on time. So anything of that sort happens and it sets you back substantially. The second thing is the government norms and rules, whether it is in terms of taxation, whether it is banking rules in terms of compliance and debt payment. So earlier, maybe 5 years or 7 years down the line, you probably missed an installment. The bank would, for 7 days, 10 days, 15 days, it would not have like a long term impact where the banks probably didn't report it also. Now it's not the case. You miss it by a day and it gets reported.
Yeah,
Anything that you do hits your civil score. I mean, it hits your company score also, it hits your personal score
personal
also,
civil.
and everywhere it gets sort of highlighted. And then next time you go to anybody, you have to justify what happened. And I mean, if you let's say you have 10 different loans from whatever the banks, and all those EMIs are there, and you need to make sure that for every EMI you're paying it on time. One day delay is a significant setback. Then now GST. Earlier, when sales tax was there, people paid sales tax late, maybe 10 days, 15 days, 20 days, 2 months, 3 months, and it was okay. You might have to pay interest, but it was okay. Now with GST, it's not the case. If you're late by a day, then the credit does not show up in your customer's account, and the customer will probably stop paying you. So any kind of leeway that you thought you had is sort of drying up. The other thing is on the salaries front or any other front. Earlier, probably people did not have 10 years, 15 years back as many opportunities, and they probably stuck with you, saying that okay, if salaries are late, no problem, we'll wait it out. Things are changing now. I mean, people have a lot more opportunity. They'll say, okay, I mean, and especially if you want people who are performers and people who are, I mean, people who work with you for a long period of time may have a bond, but people who are coming and going, you can't expect them to sort of wait for delayed salaries. So any kind of miscalculation sort of sets you back by a few months or even years if you do that. So I think having a very, so of course you have to keep working towards improving your overall cash position. Easier said than done, but I think you need to do that. And having a very keen eye on your overall transaction, I think is becoming more and more important. Discipline there also is very very crucial because your overheads every month are very high. Unlike probably a software business where your major outflow is salaries and maybe rental. In a manufacturing business, you have your raw material, you have your salaries, you have your wages, you have your electricity bills, you have your statutory dues. So all of them, so there are a lot of hits that you have to sort of cover and pay on time and make sure that you distribute your cash well. So plus budgeting also. I mean, if you're a fast growing company, budgets also become that much more difficult.
Yeah.
And I am not completely sure of what my revenue will be in which month. I might have a projection, but let's say my customer says that this month the market is not so good. Instead of 50,000, let's make only 30,000. And if you're not planning for it well enough, your inventory goes up, the cash in your system reduces, and then suddenly you feel like you don't have working capital, sufficient working capital. So a lot of these things you have to predict and you have to be dynamic given current situation. There are also challenges when, let's say, you're importing certain things from China where you have to pay advances, the material will reach you. You have to store it for 1 month, 1.5 months because the lead times are longer. So you're planning 4 months in advance, and then suddenly an order gets pushed or cancelled or something of that sort, and that inventory is sitting with you. Now there's not too much you can do with that inventory until unless the order comes back. So such things also become crucial and critical. So I think more than human management is very important in IT. I think cash management is probably as critical as anything in manufacturing.
Yeah, makes sense. One last sort of gear change to a topic that is extremely important in terms of growing a manufacturing business, which is new product development, right? And you've done this twice or thrice now, with starting with the circuits boards, then LED, then the air conditioners, and now the refrigeration product that you're launching. What is your approach to new product development? And if you can take me through, let's say for air conditioners, right? Where does that story start? Key, this is the opportunity, there's something that we can do here to finally taking it to market and scaling that operation.
So AC, we were very fortunate. The customer came to we had a discussion with the customer, and they were looking at somebody to manufacture, and we said we will do it. We will take that plunge. So there, I think it was relatively easier. We were coached by our customer. So one approach is, of course, a larger customer coaches you to how to go about making a product. That is one. The second is you start developing a product by benchmarking what is there in the market, and then you sort of create your own product out of the benchmark products in the market, where you don't probably add a lot towards technology, but you sort of tweak it in design, concept, theory, and you make a similar product. So that is the second way. The third way is, of course, you take imported products like we were discussing, and you say we will localize it, we will change a certain aspect of it to suit local requirement and local manufacturing available, and we will create a product. So these are the three relatively simpler ways of getting into manufacturing. The fourth, of course, is where you say you are going to conceptualize, design, and manufacture. That is that goes more towards R&D and development, which I think is only possible if you have a certain size. I was talking to somebody, and somebody said, this is, I think, 1.5 years back. Somebody was saying, how much is your R&D budget? So I sort of said, I don't have budget for expansion. uh, where do you want me to get R&D budget from? I mean, so of course we do spend on R&D, but we don't have a budget as such. I mean, if you don't have a minimum size and you can't sustain a team of 3 people, 5 people, 10 people also, and say that okay, you are into R&D and you can develop these products. You have 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. You need to be able to sit and watch them. I mean, make products,
Experiment.
right?
Yeah.
Experiment. Until unless you give them that leeway, or if you don't have the bandwidth to give them that leeway, then talking about R&D sort of goes out of the window. So I think as you scale, you can set certain amount of money and say that I want to invest into R&D. So the reason why I'm mentioning this is I think small and medium companies have a tough time innovating because they may not have the pocket or bandwidth to sort of develop new products. And as you keep growing, you can probably create that.
Yeah.
So typically, in a small medium company, the entrepreneur or the founder, he himself will get into R&D, make a few products, and do it. I mean, he can do it for a certain scale up to his knowledge level. Plus, if you restrict MSMEs only based on technical abilities to design and develop a product of the founder, you are making the market and industry very restrictive.
Yeah, yeah,
You
for sure.
need, you need it to be professionally developed. You need it to be, I mean, the concept can come from anyone, but
Yeah.
you need a team who can execute.
Yeah.
So unless you're able to, give that team enough food for thought and basic resources and time, I don't think product development happens.
Yeah. And I think even from an R&D perspective, the sad reality of the education system is we are not producing enough people who can truly do R&D, right? Like even the mechanical engineers from even the top, you forget the top 5-10% of the institutes, they probably don't have the required skill set for no fault of their own. They've just not been taught.
True, and I think the biggest thing in R&D is telling somebody who is motivated enough
Yeah.
to do whatever he wants
Yeah.
within a certain, definition.
Yeah.
He needs to be allowed to do whatever he wants. Now the problem is that is not normal
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
Indian context. until unless we know what the person is doing for 8 hours,
Yeah.
somewhere we're not content.
Yeah.
So
And even from a flip side perspective, by the way, I don't know if it's the Indian upbringing or something like that, because there was a time when I was in the US when I enrolled for research under a professor. And that experience was so different for me that I couldn't continue beyond 6 months. I was like, I need a goal to get to. Like, you're telling me just like explore, read more, we'll figure something out. That doesn't work in how I've grown up, which is give me a target to actually get to, right? And that's a unique skill set of like being truly be able to research and develop innovative products.
correct. So I think we are at a blend. I mean, we need to sort of first migrate to target-based research, then more of an open-based research, and then conceptual research.
Yeah.
So I think we will also migrate. I think institutions are also stuck because they don't have funding and they don't have enough resources. They can't give enough scholarships. I think it's a cycle, but I think we have started on the right path. And
Yeah.
going forward, if we can continue growing our ecosystem as far as industry is concerned, I think we'll be able to do well. Like software now, software now, I don't think India does not have the technical know how to develop a software. We do. And it got developed over the last 10, 15, 20 years.
Right.
So before that, software was probably alien to us.
Yeah.
Now I think the best of the software in the world probably will have Indian people or will have people working in India developing that software. So that change has happened in software, and I think similar change needs to happen in manufacturing as well.
Perfect.
Manufacturing R&D, and I think I believe as people we are very capable in India. We just need to
Yeah.
sort of tap into that and make use of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the original points that you've hit, and we definitely need to get that right, is the skill development piece of it, right? Like we have a lot of human resource that just needs to be trained across different, across different roles and responsibilities that are required in a manufacturing business. And that unless we get that right, it's going to be a hard uphill task to actually build an ecosystem.
True.
Yeah. So, Krit, thank you so much. This was a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for being transparent about your journey. What a wonderful journey! I think just starting from where you did to where you are right now, and as you said, it's still a small business, small medium business. So a long way to go. Wish you all the best, and thank you for taking time out.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.